Saint Christopher is a dog-headed man.
The oracle, bound in wet blankets, spoke for the first time with a voice to silence the angels. The 8 men and their horses stood silently, paying close attention, while turning away from a 9th man, who hung in the tree above them, his face frozen in twisted pain. Scriven had been executed by the leader of this savage pack for the crime of writing. Barry Follett would have let his victim stay where his lance had dropped him, but being eaten by wolves was considered a terrible fate, even if post-mortem, so the men agreed he should be put out of the reach of wild animals. None of them cared enough to go through the motions of a real burial, and no one ever wanted to talk about the dead man again. So they strung him up in the branches of the nearest tree. The dense forests of 16th century Europe were saturated with wolf packs. They had no fear of men, especially in the higher elevations and ragged mountains. No one understood why Follett's intolerance of writing had led him to kill this man, and now he had forbidden any discussion about what had occurred. Not that conversation had been rampant thus far in their journey. The snow and cold blighted all communication. No one had time for small talk or cared to hear what the others had to say. Only the strange words of the oracle, which seemed instigated by the sudden violence, were worth heeding. And the men listened carefully before the wind snatched its words away, whisking their sound and their mystery into the eternal fury that squalled above. The group had made it to the hard granite of the upper Sierras, and its cracked, narrow paths were tighter and less forgiving than Barry Follett's treacherous fist of a heart. Their leader sat alone on a bare rock above the gathering, silhouetted by a bright cold sun that stared down from the steel-blue dome of the sky. He was cleaning the head of his lance for a second time, while planning the route his 7 iron-shod pilgrims would take. He had hoped the first words the oracle uttered would reveal his path. He was not expecting the inexplicable statement about a saint. Follett had recruited his crew of mercenaries only months earlier, shortly after accepting the task to deliver the sacred oracle to the Monastery of the Eastern Gate. His employers were the highest members of the High Church. They had summoned him, and he had consented only after being reassured that his potential employer had nothing to do with the Inquisition. 3 solemn priests questioned him for more than an hour before nodding their agreement. One, an Ethiopian from a Coptic order, had been holding a small object during their meeting. He stood and held the precious thing so Follett could see it. It was a miniature, painted on ivory, showing a distant view of a vast mountain-like structure and its surroundings. The oldest priest declared, "This is a depiction of your destination when it was known as the Tower of Babel." The black finger of the priest standing over Follett pointed at the tower, and he said, "'Tis now called Das Kagel." A vast structure of spiraling balconies and stacked archways reached up to penetrate the clouds. A great movement of the populace speckled the enormous tower, while villages and townships crowded around its base, all balanced against a calm sea supporting a swarm of ships. The finger moved a fraction of an inch over the tiny painting to point more exactly at something that could not be seen. "This is where you will find the monastery. And I should tell you, the tower is changed beyond recognition. But you will know it by its profile and by the populace that infest the base. The Blessed One must be inside the monastery gates by Shrovetide, before the liturgical season of Lent closes the world and opens the mirror of heaven." Follett cared little for heaven, and had never been near the Eastern Gate. Few had. It was a shunned place that most men would avoid. Only a savage gristle of a man like Barry Follett would, for a price, undertake what needed to be done. The priest abruptly palmed the miniature, and the conversation moved on to the details of Follett's responsibility, payment, and duty. When the terms were accepted, the black priest described the abnormal and difficult qualities of Follett's cargo, especially the feeding instructions. "The blessed oracle has little attachment to this world. Its withered limbs make it incapable of survival without close support. You must appoint a man to watch it night and day, and to supervise its cleaning. It eats little, but its sustenance is specific. It eats only the marrow of bones, and those bones must be treated, prepared, by the speech of sinners." The other two priests paid great attention to Follett, gauging and weighing the confusion and disgust in his eyes.